An election lawyer could have done okay. The Senate leadership, I want to get into this, and Bob, I want to fire it back out to you. It's been talked about that Senator George Maziarz, if again the Republicans take over, is this a possible move? Even though the assumption is that Senator Skelos would be the leader for the Republicans.
You never can tell what's going to happen, especially with all of the machinations that are going to be coming up over the next few weeks. But Senator Maziarz was in that courtroom today that I was talking about, and we did touch on that a little bit, and he said to me that he presumed that the Senate leader would be Senator Skelos. Okay,
I guess that puts that to bed. How about the conference leader for the Democrats, Casey? There's been a lot made about this, given some of the scandals and the names that have been popped up.
Right, and the problem is that all the names that have popped up, almost all of them, have been mentioned in the Inspector General's aqueduct report. So you can cough up names like Jeff Klein, Andrew Stewart Cousins. All of these people are mentioned in that report in wildly varying degrees of culpability, I guess might be the word, but criticism, certainly.
Mm-hmm. So, Jimmy, basically, we don't really know. Like good reporters, we're all asking questions, and there's no answers here.
Yeah, no, it's a very fluid situation. Of course, you remember in 2008 when the Senate Dems finally got to 32, the original Gang of Four, before there was a coup, before there was an MTA bailout battle, there was the Gang of Four saying we're not going to vote for Malcolm Smith. So it's gonna be up in the air, and I think it might be someone, because of what Casey said, because so many people were tainted with this AG report, it could be someone really from left field, someone who's a consensus candidate. And also whether or not the Democrats are in the majority or the minority is a big factor, because the majority is a constitutional titular position in the Senate. You need 32 people to back you for majority leader and president. But to be the minority leader, you just need a majority vote of your conference. So if there were 30 senators, you just need 16 people, and that's a far different bar to cross than the 32 vote bar. And so it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. There's a lot of egg on a lot of people's faces. And it's really people seem to be waiting to start gaming it until the dust has settled a little bit. And if it becomes clear what the battle is, then I think we'll see more aggressive moves.
Meanwhile, against that backdrop, I want to transition to the transition for Governor-elect Cuomo, who's moving forward, of course, with that process. He has a number of policy documents that he's put out that he's already worked on. And it seems, though, with a $9 billion, of course, it depends on who you ask, but a $9 billion deficit, that's probably issue number one, it seems. He has some political capital, as any new politician to take an office does. Does he spend a good amount of that political capital tackling this issue, given all the interest involved and just how difficult it has been for, whether it's an Eliot Spitzer who was just beginning to look at some of these issues, to Governor Patterson, who then was caught mired in some of these issues, and now a Governor Cuomo? What do you guys think?
Well, he spoke to the Times Union's editorial board about this at length. He said that his first budget is going to be a management document in which he wants to restructure state government. And he said that we can judge him as a success or a failure as governor by June. So I think he intends to put a lot of political capital in right away. I think he intends to do some battle. I think he intends to make substantive major changes. He's got a lot of smart people working for him, a lot of former Eliot Spitzer hands. One notable is Paul Francis, Governor Spitzer's budget director, who was kind of led the authorship of Cuomo the books, volumes 1 through 7. Maybe there was 8, I forget.
There was 8.
I thought it was 8.
But yeah. Environment was 8, I'm pretty sure.
I like that name for the volume.
But the point is that he's done a lot of thinking about this. Clearly, when it became clear in the polls that Cuomo was going to kind of coast to victory over Palladino, and as Cuomo said this week on a radio show, they've been thinking a lot about this, and now it's just a question of personnel. So it's interesting to see who he's going to bring in. You can probably expect some of the people from the AG's office, Ben Lawsky, Joe Percoco, some of his closest confidants, to land in the administration. And a lot of people have said that a guy, Michael Del Giudice, who dates back to the old days of Mario Cuomo, has been very involved in the transition and keeping things
all right. Now, Liz, let me ask you, though. It seems like he's made it very clear, look, not everything's going to change on day one, of course, the famous line from Eliot Spitzer, so it may take some time to deal with these issues, and yet these are issues that need to be dealt with probably fairly quickly and in a timely fashion. What's your gut feeling on this?
Well, first of all, the day one thing I thought was interesting. That was a comment that Andrew Cuomo made, and I actually find this fairly amazing. This is a guy who was just elected to be governor of the state of New York, and we have not seen him since Tuesday. In fact, if he may be anywhere, we have no idea. He called into a radio show, so I don't know where he might be. He is reportedly going to show up to Somos in Puerto Rico late Sunday night to speak on Monday morning, but that's only after he was harshly criticized by attendees here who felt like he was slighting the Hispanic community. So already you see that, you know, when you're Attorney General, you're the white knight, and I think that Eliot Spitzer showed that, and your numbers are very high. All you do is help people. When you're the governor, and you, of course, you know, make some very powerful people uncomfortable with your subpoenas, etc. But when you're governor, you have to build consensus, and you have to make people negotiate, and you have to make them do what you want. This is going to be difficult. It was difficult for Eliot Spitzer. It will be difficult for Andrew Cuomo. And just today, or this week rather, we find out there's $315 million hole in this budget. Next year's budget is going to be even worse.
Yeah, so some challenges moving forward. I want to send it out to Bob because I want to switch gears to his opponent, Carl Palladino, who I guess we'll want to ask, what's next for him? Do we know?
Well, we don't know. Just like Andrew Cuomo, nobody has seen Carl Palladino or heard from him, I guess, unlike Andrew Cuomo. But he said before the vote on Tuesday that he would never run for any office ever again. So if that's the case, that would rule him out. He also lost very badly, somewhere around 2-1 in the city of Buffalo on Tuesday, even though he won Erie County quite handily. He lost the city, and that kind of rules out any thought that he would run for mayor. So if we take him at his word, we have seen the last of Carl Palladino as a political candidate.
Casey, do you buy it?
Well, yes, I do. Something else that will help Palladino sort of go into that good night is the fact that his taxpayers line, which is his kind of self-funded alternate ballot line, is almost certainly not going to get to the $50,000 vote threshold that it needs to establish a permanent place on the ballot. So he's not going to become a leader of any kind of movement, even if he ever thought that he might be able to do that.
No. Do you think, though, that maybe there's a little bit of an impact here because his supporters, given that there was so many people who voted for him in that county, and it's a weighted vote, I believe, that then goes towards the Republican conference. Does that play up a little bit, give a little more weight to the upstate contention?
Yeah, this is actually something I'm waiting to see the raw data to crunch the exact numbers. I got some stuff from another network and tried to go through them, but it looks like Erie County had 6.93% of the weighted vote at the state convention last year to pick candidates and to pick a state chairman. And I expect that's going to be higher because Palladino carried Erie County by a 55,000 vote margin, whereas he did much worse downstate in kind of the traditional Republican power bases, places like Westchester County, places like Nassau and Suffolk County. So that's going to be interesting. And it's going to be interesting to see what his Republican backers out there, people like Henry Wojtasek in Niagara County, the former chair who was, ran his own bid for state chairman, Nick Langworthy, the Erie County Republican chairman, what they're going to do with kind of this newfound block of power. And the other thing that's interesting is Republicans are doing a lot of soul searching now. They're also pointing a lot of fingers about who's responsible for what went wrong, to what degree is Palladino responsible. And it was interesting to me as I kind of reported this out today. I spoke with Republican State Chairman Ed Cox, who Palladino vowed to replace if he were victorious, but now Cox is saying, aha, I win. Where things are going forward. And it doesn't seem like Palladino is going to be much of a force in that effort. It seems as though everyone is willing to say, well, buddy, you had your chance, thanks a lot, and, have fun in Buffalo.
Bob, what do you think? Is there potential for a shakeup at the top of the Republicans in terms of the chairman? How does this all shake out after this election?
Oh, I think there definitely is. I think there's a lot of dissatisfaction in a lot of different ways. Ed Cox will tell you, of course, that maybe he's going to pick up the state Senate, and certainly he expanded the congressional delegation in New York State the way he promised that he would. But nevertheless, there's a lot of dissatisfaction, and a lot of it has been pointed out here tonight. A lot of it is centered in Western New York. Henry Wojtasek told me today he would not be a candidate, and Nick Langworthy says he is not a candidate too, but I think there will be a lot of pressure on both of them to possibly enter into the mix. Both of them are held in high regard by a lot of people, and they kind of know their way around politics in this state too. So that's something we got to watch. And don't forget, Ed Cox remains chairman until September unless he steps down.
That's right. Real quickly, Casey and Liz, I just want to ask you because you can play devil's advocate and say, well, you know what? It's a very Democratic state, and there were some congressional pickups here. So, Liz.
Yeah, first of all, two things. One is those congressional pickups, I don't think had anything to do with the state GOP. Those congressional pickups had to do with the National Republican Party that poured a lot of money into New York, and they had a lot to do with outside independent groups that were led by people like Karl Rove, who put a lot of money into New York, too. I mean, it might be that if the Burkle and Maffei race in New York 25 comes out for the Republicans the way they want it to, that New York will be the state where the GOP experienced the most pickups in the nation in the House. That's amazing. We are a Democrat-dominated state. That's a really amazing thing. There was a fight between the RNC chairman, Michael Steele, and Ed Cox about the allocation of resources, and the money went directly to the counties and not to the state party for Get Out the Vote effort. So for Ed Cox to say that he, to claim victory on those races is sort of a red herring.
Yeah, Liz is absolutely right. For Ed Cox to point to the congressional, races and say that the GOP did really well, he's actually arguing against his own point. The fact that the legislature, that the GOP only picked up a handful of seats in the Assembly and only 2 seats in the Senate in an election that saw really an incredible, redward shift in the spectrum across the country, does not speak very well to Ed Cox's leadership.
All right, guys, we're going to have to leave it there. Jimmy, Casey, thank you so much. Bob out in Buffalo, and Liz in Puerto Rico. Thanks so much. We'll have more from Liz
Bye,
coming up in just a little bit,
Stay
some
warm.
interviews that she had earlier in the day.